My name is Lori Thompson, and I'm telling my quilt story at the Quilts of Valor 20th Anniversary Conference in Paducah, Kentucky. Today is September 14, 2023, and it's particularly special for me because I'm serving as the executive director currently for the organization, and it's been a privilege to meet quilters across the U.S. and wrap our service members and veterans. I'm excited to tell my quilting story. I came into quilting later. I was a garment sewer for years, 4-H kid who learned how to sew, studied clothing and textiles in college, and then went a different direction. And then got into quilting 7 years ago when my friend got a long arm. So I have to credit the long arm for getting me into quilting. Once my friend had the long arm and quilting felt easier, I was hooked. I just didn't want to do quilts on a domestic machine. That was a little intimidating. So I quilted happily with her help for 4 years, and then she moved out of state, and then it was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? So I was also at a crossroads at that time in my life where I had taken a break from my nonprofit career and was pursuing craft classes and things like that to teach and build into a business, and then the pandemic hit. So in September 2020, I had a decision to make around that time. Was I going back to work for a nonprofit, or was I buying a long arm? And my husband says, buy the long arm first, and the rest has been history. It's opened up a completely new world for me. One of my quilting friends asked me, she said, everybody bought a Peloton, and you bought a long arm. And I said, yeah. She goes, you got the better deal. And so here I am 3 years later on that journey, which led me to my role with Quilts of Valor. I had a nonprofit background in quilting, and just randomly found the posting 2 years ago and applied, and here we are. And it's just been a great journey all the way around with Quilts of Valor and with long arming, and it's just opened up a whole new community for me. My long arm that I have an Innova M24 with the autopilot, so I say I'm a digital quilter. I don't do any free motion, anything like that. But you know, for me, it's really fun to get the computer going, get the machine going, and connect with other quilters and help them finish their quilts, and also quilt some Quilts of Valor. My long arm is named Roxy. I'm in the Denver area, so Roxy has altitude and attitude, and she's a tough cookie. But it's been great to just make my own quilts and work with others to have their quilts come to life. So the quilt that I'm going to share is a Quilt of Valor that I made for my uncle, Colonel Noel Keller. He served in the Marine Corps, lifelong career, and it was a privilege to present that to him in April of 22. And yeah, it was fun. I got to piece it from the beginning and used a great pattern from one of our members, long-armed it, and it was just amazing to present it to him. And of course put a Quilt of Valor label on it and went through the ceremony in California.
My name is Kathy Vick, and I am from Tennessee, and I am going to tell you the story at this year's Quilt of Valor 20th Anniversary Celebration in Paducah, Kentucky. Today is Thursday, September the 14th, and I wanted to share my story about a COVID quilt that was made by a bunch of young people. During the COVID, I went into the Eagle River Boys and Girls Club and taught young people from the ages of 7 to 9 how to sew for the very first time. And we put together a Quilt of Valor. The quilt was done with lots of love and lots of problems and lots of steps, but the children learned how to sew. And when we tried to find a veteran to award it to, one of the young men's dad had just returned home from Iraq. And when the media, local media in Anchorage called and wanted a report, said, hey, could we award a quilt? Or like, it's COVID. And we said, we'll go to your house. So we called up the veteran's family and said, can we come award this quilt? When we got there, his family, his next generation family, all his brothers and sisters and everybody were there, and it was an honor for them. The young man was 9 years old at the time, and when the media asked him, how did it feel to make this quilt and sign the quilt and give it to your father? And the young man started crying. He said, I just wanted my dad home. And everybody got quiet. And when we started talking to the family had over 120 years of service to this country. One of the most touching moments was just seeing young people learning how to give back through a time of COVID, and then also a time when their fathers were deployed. And that's my experience.
Ready.
Hi, my name is Denise Salyers. I'm telling my quilt story at the Quilts of Valor 20th Anniversary Conference in Paducah, Kentucky. Today is Friday, September 15th. I'm from Arizona, and this is a quilt that was designed and created by my 4-H group who have kids ages 8 to 14 that sewed on this quilt and entered it in the county fair. And you'll notice that they did get a ribbon, a blue ribbon on this, and we are going to present this quilt at our November 4-H meeting, community club meeting, to a veteran and award the quilt. So this is a story of, we've been doing this for now 9 years, and we have probably awarded close to 15 quilts. So it's my mission every year to have all of the kids work on the quilts, and they also do the quilting of it using my computerized quilt machine. So they do it from start to finish. At the November meeting of every year, we award the Quilts of Valor through a ceremony at our 4-H meeting, community club meeting, and the kids do the presentation. They say all the parts and read off the information about the veteran, and usually the veteran is a family member or a close friend. It's a way of recognizing their services and sacrifices for the benefit of America. So it really creates communication when it happens, because the kids have to do an essay or a study on what it is they actually did while this veteran was in the service. So it's really informative, and it's really well received in our community.
You are.
My name is Denise Salyers, and I'm telling my quilt story at the Quilts of Valor 20th Anniversary Conference in Paducah, Kentucky. Today is Friday, September 15th. Today I'd like to show you a quilt that was made by kids of military sponsors. This was made this summer in 2023 at a 4-H camp site that was hosting a camp for kids of the military. And the kids put this quilt together, so I'm really proud of them. It meant a lot to them. They understood why we were making it, and were really touched and made sure that they did a good job. And I just wanted to thank them for participating, and we'll be awarding this Quilt of Valor sometime in the near future. Thank you. My name is Denise Salyers, and I'm telling my quilt story at the Quilts of Valor 20th Anniversary Conference in Paducah, Kentucky. Today is Friday, September 15th. This quilt was made using the Quilt of Valor Blocks of the Year pattern for 2023. And I assembled the block kits and took them to the county fair and set up 4 sewing machines, where then we invited people that were attending the fair to sit down and sew on some of these blocks. So we had a lot of kids, a lot of 4-H kids, parents, grandparents, men, women, all ages, sit down and sit and sew for an hour or so and create these blocks. We then got to the point during the 4-day fair that we had enough blocks created to form the quilt. So some 4-H kids put the blocks together in rows and assembled the quilt top. I quilted the quilt top. It is yet to be bound, but we plan on presenting this quilt to a veteran for the Quilts of Valor during the county fair 2024, which will be in March of 2024 in Phoenix, Arizona. So I just wanted to say I was really proud of all of the people that stopped by. We had lots and lots of interest in the quilt and in the sewing. So thank you.
Hello, my name's Rhoda Johnson, and I'm telling my quilt story at the Quilt of Valor 20th Anniversary Convention in Paducah, Kentucky. I'm from Huntsville, Alabama, and this is my koala quilt. I made this in, I believe it was April of 2020. It was kind of a COVID thing when I got home. But they also had those wildfires in Australia, and all the koalas had gotten hurt. And I saw this Elizabeth Hartman pattern. I was like, oh, I gotta do it. So I did, and you notice all the koalas are Tula pink fabric. They're not traditional gray pandas, and it's just fun. And I was going to donate it to the people in Australia. My brother lives out there in Australia, and I got enough quilts, so I decided to keep it. And I put Minky on the back, and so it goes with me anytime I go anywhere out of town. I take it, put it on my bed, so I have the extra weight and the warmth, and I just love it. And a little side note, I was cutting this out. It's like 1 million pieces. I was cutting it out, and I bet nobody knows anybody that's ever broken their toe using a ruler. But yes, it can be done. When you drop it from your cutting table with the pointy end down, and it hits right between the joints. Broke it, screamed, cussed, 2 in the morning. I was like, I'm done. But this is my quilt.
My name is Don Dixon. I'm telling my quilt story at the Quilts of Valor 20th Anniversary Conference in Paducah, Kentucky. Today is Friday, September 15th. I made my first quilt about 16 years ago when my son and his wife were pregnant with twins. My sister got me into this, and I've been making quilts ever since. About 14 years ago, I became involved with Quilts of Valor and made several quilts. And then a few years ago, I came across these Defenders of Freedom panels at Goodwill. I thought, oh, I like those. So I made a quilt using that fabric and found out that, well, I can make a Quilt of Valor that is not red, white, and blue. And it was very popular. Then a few years later, the panels became available. They brought them back into print, and I was able to buy some more. I made a collection of about 6 of these quilts and have awarded 5 of them. And recently I've awarded one to Arlen and one to Tim down in Fort Hood, Texas, who was an amputee, and then recently one for Joe. All of the veterans that are awarded this quilt are airborne, 101st Airborne, and I think it's really unique to be able to have a very specific quilt for a veteran. Joe suffers from chronic PTSD and did not want the quilt, but his best friend Jim insisted on nominating him and insisted that I present him the quilt. However, he was really reluctant, and so I had Jim present Joe with this Quilt of Valor. And then when he had finished the presentation on his own, he said he wanted to call me, and all he said to me was, thank you. And Jim sent me a picture of Joe covered up with the quilt, and that told the whole story. It really meant a lot to him, far more than he had ever anticipated. And that's my story. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Robin Harris, and I'm telling my quilt story at the Quilts of Valor 20th Anniversary Conference in Paducah, Kentucky. Today is Thursday, September 24th in 2023. My 3 minutes is going to have 4 parts. First part's the intro, and then the second part is the process of how this quilt happened, and then the third part is what's my takeaway. So first of all, I'm a 5th generation fiber artist, and they probably go back further, but we've been quilting in our family for many generations. I started quilting in 1980s. That's before rotary cutters, before special rulers, but now I like it much better now. And my favorite piecing machine is a Singer 1950-201-2, which was my mother's sewing machine, which passed on to me. My favorite quilting machine, I'm a sitting quilter, is a Bernina Q20, which I need a whole lot more practice with, but I love it. My favorite thing about quilting is getting new tools and processes, and I do that by taking classes, and then by teaching classes, and then I take my money I earn from teaching classes and buy new tools. So, to me, quilting's a process and a puzzle, and when you're all finished, you learn things and you have things to share. And what I love now that I'm older is that I'm able to quilt because I love it, not out of necessity, which I have made my living with my sewing in the past times. So let me have you look at and enjoy my designed anniversary quilt. And the process of how this started is it started with an idea and a dream, and we're having our 20th year anniversary of the Quilts of Valor, and I said, well, I love to design and I love the annual national block drives. So I said, I want to go back and see if I can find 20 or more blocks, knowing this has only been in process for 10 years. So I had to find the blocks. I found some of the makers of the blocks and picked them out. So that was my dream, and I said, well, I want to use a panel. And I said, well, I want to put a panel in the center so I can get you focused just on the land of the free. And that was my dream. But then to make that reality, you know, you can say that, I have this idea in about 2 seconds, but to make the dream a reality sometimes takes a little bit longer. Not quite as long as 20 years, as Catherine Roberts had, but our reality was first I had to resize these. Some of them were 12.5 inches, so that was the resizing, and there's a lot of scraps over there from that. I had to lay out the patterns, and I use the electric quilter machine. I'm number 8, and that quilt computer design allowed me to lay this out, put my panel in, and sometimes you still have to wiggle these measurements when you get cut, so you never know for sure how the sashing is going to be and how it's going to change. So I changed the patterns out, I drew out a panel, I constructed blocks, put the blocks down on the floor at one of our quilt meetings, and all the gals said, well, I like these over here and I like these over here, and I took pictures of them all, and when I got it home I laid it out. My husband moved it once more, and this is the block layout. These are not like 2013, 2014. You'd have to have a little key, which I'll make up to go with it, of which years. But I do know that I joined Quilts of Valor with this block. This is my first block in 2018. So I constructed them. The next part then is the layering, the choosing the threads, choosing the patterns that I'm going to quilt it with. And this is very, a little bit of a mixture, because I free motioned the eagle, so that's kind of thread painted, and then the waves in there, and then outlined the blocks. But if you look close inside each block, you'll see a star. Some have a star within a star. And that's how we did with the quilting. And then when I was starting to get it together, doing the blocking and getting ready to wash it to make sure my red didn't bleed, I said, who am I going to give this to? Who can we award this to that would be someone that would be special? And that's where I started negotiating with Tammy. And we were able to, her finally yesterday, to say yes, that we would be able to award her a quilt. So what gets written in my journal, and my quilting journal, or just my thing, is that the issues that are confronted as the process is made, and my biggest issue is centering the panel, and then doing the math again and again, is this going to fit? And I have 3 sets of sashing cut, 2 sets will go in another quilt. They're different widths. The takeaway for me that I also wrote down is that I always love that my patience is getting better. I used to want to anticipate, which meant I didn't spend the time using my sewing skills, and so my corners didn't match, and all the corners match finally. And the teamwork with my group, not only in helping the layouts, but encouraging and saying, well, what did you do for this, or how did you figure this out? And we have a lot of us chat a lot around our sewing, so we have that. The joy, the pride, the anticipation of another award presentation, and what I want to say is now I am a part of Quilts of Valor history.
Hi, my name is Tammy Replogle, and I'm telling you my quilt story at the Quilts of Valor 20th Anniversary Conference in Paducah, Kentucky. Today is Friday, September 15, 2023. I made this quilt for my brother, Denver Douglas Higley. He was in the Air Force for 4 years back in 1972 through about 76, 78. I'm not real sure on that. But he was in the Air Force. When he left the Air Force, he went right into the Air National Guard, where he was a civil servant in the Air National Guard for well over 25 years. He retired at age 60, 5. He currently is in Grosse Pointe, Michigan, where he is very active in his church and as well as the military support groups in Michigan. I made this specifically because of the eagle, and if you notice, the Ohio stars are in the corners. That's because we were born and raised in Ohio, and it holds true meaning for us. The 3 stars in each corner symbolizes 3 bronze stars that our father received when he was in World War II. So I made this quilt so that it was very representative of our family. The northern geese or Canadian geese border was also, we would sit on the family farm and watch the geese migrate north and south, and that was an important thing for us. Like I say, the whole quilt is here as memories of our growing up in Ohio, as my true pride and honor to have a brother who cared so much that even at age 50, he went to Afghanistan and Iraq. His comment was, "How can I send young men if I'm not willing to go?" I couldn't be more proud of him, and for that, I'm giving him the Quilt of Valor. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Terry Johnson, and I'm telling my quilt story at the Quilts of Valor 20th Anniversary Conference in Paducah, Kentucky. Today is September 14th of 2023. Well, back in 2009, I met Mary Ann Fonz in Winterset, Iowa, in her shop. I was visiting there with my stepmother, Pat Howell, and Mary Ann told me about Under Our Wings, and she said, "You ought to join Quilts of Valor and get involved. You're a very active quilter." And I said, "Well, not right now. I'm busy traveling and I have a young son," but I said, "As soon as I retire, I'll get involved." Well, in 2016, I made this quilt for my dad, who had served in the Air Force during the Korean conflict, and even the label shows our picture as we traveled and visited the Korean memorial there in Washington, D.C., so it has a special label showing our picture there to honor him. But little did I know that when I awarded this quilt at the Quilt of Valor conference in Des Moines, Iowa, that he would only survive 11 months after that award. But I went home so touched by wrapping him in that quilt that I, not unlike Catherine Roberts, told all my quilting friends, "We've got to do this." And so we went out to dinner one night, had tacos at the local Moose Lodge, and in walked the chief of police, who was a 35-year veteran and a command sergeant major. And he was getting ready to do a fundraiser for the Flags of Freedom on Interstate 80, exit 56. And I said, "What beautiful way of honoring our veterans, but to give Quilts of Valor at that event to open the evening." Now, I was not involved with Quilts of Valor. I had to call Rita Pennington and say, "Can you help me make this happen?" And sure enough, Rita brought the 6 quilts. We were awarded 6 quilts that night. And thus, the next day, I joined Quilts of Valor and started Illinois Valley Quilts of Valor. We are 5 years old and celebrating our anniversary of 5 years, and we awarded about 600 quilts in those 5 years. So it has touched my life. It has changed who I am as a quilter, and I hope you'll join us.
My name is Jacqueline McKinstry, and I'm telling my quilt story at the Quilts of Valor 20th Anniversary Conference in Paducah, Kentucky. Today is September 14th, 2023, and this is my 11th year in my journey with Quilts of Valor. They originally started when my friends were awarding wounded veterans at Fort Rucker with Quilts of Valor, and we got all excited and interested and started. And I needed something to do because my husband and my son were both deployed to Afghanistan at the same time. It was the 3rd combat tour for my son and the 5th for my husband in over 30 years. He went in 1982. They're both Apache pilots. And so it's been very stressful, and I needed something. So the Quilts of Valor filled the bill. I volunteered when a friend of mine retired just as a volunteer, and Long story short, 2016 on 4th of July, I decided to take the state coordinator job for Alabama, and it has been delightful. We have awarded so many quilts, all the veteran stories. I've done my mom's best friend who was a POW in the Hanoi Hilton, so I always have to call the other state coordinators and say, I'm coming to Wisconsin, I'm coming to Minnesota to award relatives and friends. That was amazing. One of the first Navy SEALs, I awarded him a quilt. And my favorite thing, I've been working on my uncle's quilt, trying to design it. And so this Christmas, I'm going to award my uncle, who was in Vietnam. He was in intelligence, and a lot of what he did he can't talk about, but he was a Bronze Star recipient, and he was just one of my heroes besides my mom's friend. And so I just finished his quilt. It's a mixture of 3 different quilt teachers, and I just got the idea. I've been drawing it for 3 years, and it's finally done, so I'm very excited. But this weekend, I've got a couple I'm awarding on Friday night, and the 15 veterans coming for the annual Wounded Warrior Hunt at Fort Novosel on Saturday. So I'm very excited to just keep going. Another 11 years.